My name is Grace Morrison. I am 26 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. The heavy wooden doors of the chapel closed behind me with a soft thud. I tried to be quiet. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to pay my respects to Great Aunt Ruth. I walked up the aisle and sat in the second row, directly behind the people who used to be my whole world. My mother turned around first. She didn't look sad. She didn't look like a grieving niece. She looked at me with sharp, angry eyes. She likely saw the guest book signature I had just left in the foyer, or maybe she had finally found the public records I sent. "You changed your name," she said. She didn't whisper. Her voice cut right through the silence of the room. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. The entire chapel seemed to freeze. The soft organ music faded into the background as every single head turned to look at us. My sister, Vivian, gasped. My brother, Brendan, stared with his mouth open. They expected me to shrink. They expected me to apologize or cry, but I didn't flinch. I sat up straighter. For years, I had been invisible to them. But in this moment, as the silence stretched out, I realized something important. This moment wasn't exposing me. It was exposing them. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Grace Morrison. I am 26 years old. I grew up in a house in Austin that was always loud. It wasn't a happy loud. It was a chaotic, demanding kind of loud. The noise took up all the space in the rooms, leaving no air for anyone else. The noise came from three sources. It came from my mother, who was always worrying about appearances. It came from my sister, Vivian, who was always crying or laughing too loudly. And it came from my brother, Brendan, who was just simply the center of the universe. I was the quiet one. I was Grace. In our house, being quiet didn't mean you were good. It meant you were invisible. I learned this lesson when I was very young. I remember a Tuesday morning when I was 7 years old. The kitchen was a mess of activity. My mother was standing at the counter, frantically trying to scrub a stain out of Brendan's baseball jersey. He had a game that afternoon, and in our family, Brendan's games were treated like national holidays. "Hold still," my mother snapped, scrubbing hard. "If you look like a mess, the coach won't play you." Brendan was eating cereal, unbothered. He knew it would get done. He dropped a spoonful of milk onto the floor and didn't even look down. On the other side of the kitchen, Vivian was sitting at the table. She was 10, and she was having a meltdown about her hair. "It looks flat," she wailed. She pulled at a strand of her blonde hair. "Mom, you have to fix it. I can't go to school like this. Sarah will make fun of me." "In a minute, Vivian," my mother yelled back, not looking up from the jersey. I stood by the refrigerator. I was wearing my school uniform. My shoes were tied. My backpack was on my shoulders. I was ready, but I was also hungry. "Mom," I said. My voice was soft. It didn't cut through the noise of scrubbing and wailing. "Mom, can I have lunch money?" I asked, a little louder. She didn't turn around. "Brendan, stop moving. Vivian, get the hairbrush from my purse and do it yourself for once." I waited. I watched the clock on the microwave. The numbers changed. 7:45, 7:46. The bus came at 8 o'clock. I walked over to the counter and stood right next to her. I tugged on the sleeve of her robe. "Mom, I need lunch money," I said. She finally looked at me, but her eyes weren't seeing me. They were looking through me, stressed and annoyed. "Grace, honestly," she huffed. "Can't you see I'm doing a million things? Why didn't you ask me last night?" I had asked her last night. She had been on the phone with Aunt Ruth. I had asked her this morning before she started scrubbing. She hadn't heard me then either. "Just take $1 from the jar," she said, waving her hand dismissively before turning back to Brendan. "There's change in there." I went to the jar on the top of the fridge. I had to drag a chair over to reach it. Inside, there were 3 pennies and a paperclip. There was no dollar. I looked back at them. Vivian was now having her hair braided by my mother, who had abandoned the jersey. Brendan was leaving the milk puddle on the floor. They were a unit. They were a knotted ball of energy and need. I climbed down from the chair. I didn't say anything. I went to the pantry and found a box of crackers. I put a handful in a plastic bag. That was my lunch. I walked to the bus stop alone. I ate the crackers at noon. I didn't complain when I got home. And that was the problem. Because I didn't complain, they assumed I was fine. Because I didn't demand, they assumed I didn't need anything. As I got older, the dynamic solidified into concrete. Vivian got softness. If she got a bad grade, my mother would soothe her. "It's okay, honey, that teacher is too hard anyway." Brendan got attention. If he got a C on a test, my father would hire a tutor and buy him a new video game to keep his spirits up. I got tasks. When I was 12, I came home with a straighter report card. I put it on the kitchen table, right in the center, where they couldn't miss it. My father walked in first. He threw his keys on top of my report card. "Grace," he said, "did you unload the dishwasher? I need a clean glass." "I got all A's," I said. He opened the cupboard. "That's nice. Where are the glasses?" "I got the highest grade in math," I added. I wanted him to pick up the keys. I wanted him to see the paper. "Great," he said, finding a mug instead. "Make sure you fold the towels in the dryer before dinner. Your brother needs his gym shorts." He walked out of the room. He never looked at the paper. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the keys covering my grades. I realized then that my achievements were not gifts to them. They were conveniences. If I was doing well, it meant they didn't have to worry about me. It meant they could spend all their energy on Vivian's drama and Brendan's ego. I became the easy child, the one who didn't need help with homework, the one who didn't need rides because I learned to walk or take the bus, the one who remembered to buy milk when the gallon was empty. They didn't thank me for this. They just expected it. One summer, when I was 14, the difference became painfully clear. We were supposed to go on a family vacation to the lake. I had packed my bag 3 days early. I was excited. I loved the water. It was the only place where the noise of my family seemed to disappear. The morning we were leaving, Vivian woke up with a stomach ache. "I can't go," she moaned from her bed. "It hurts too much." My mother felt her forehead. "She's warm. We can't put her in a car for 4 hours. My father sighed. "Well, we can't leave her here alone." They looked at each other. Then they looked at me. I was standing in the hallway with my suitcase. I was wearing my swimsuit under my clothes. "Grace," my mother said. Her voice had that specific tone. The tone that sounded like a request but was actually an order. "You don't mind staying, do you?" "Staying?" I asked. "But it's vacation." "Vivian is sick," my father said sternly. "Someone has to make sure she drinks fluids and takes her medicine. Your mother and I really need this break. Brendan has his baseball camp nearby." "But I want to go," I said. It was one of the few times I pushed back. "Why can't one of you stay?" My mother looked shocked. "Grace, don't be selfish. Your father has worked hard all year. I've been planning this for months. You're the responsible one. You're good at taking care of things." The responsible one. It was a trap. It was a label they used to chain me to the house. "We'll bring you back a souvenir," my father said, picking up Brendan's duffel bag. They left 10 minutes later. I watched the car pull out of the driveway. Brendan was in the front seat, controlling the radio. My mother was checking her lipstick in the mirror. I went back inside. I walked into Vivian's room. She was watching TV, eating a bag of chips. She didn't look sick anymore. "Are they gone?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," she said, changing the channel. "I didn't want to go to that stupid lake anyway. There's no internet there." She hadn't been sick. She just hadn't wanted to go. And because she didn't want to go, I had to stay. I spent that week in the silent house. I cooked for myself. I brought Vivian sodas when she yelled for them. I sat in the backyard and pretended the sprinkler was the lake. When they came back, they didn't bring me a souvenir. They forgot. "It was so chaotic packing up," my mother said, breezy and unbothered. "We'll get you something next time." But there was no next time. I stopped asking to go. I stopped putting my report cards on the table. I learned to shrink. I learned to navigate the house like a ghost, avoiding the floorboards that creaked, avoiding the times of day when they were most stressed. I packed my own lunches. I signed my own permission slips, forging my mother's signature because she would never check. I celebrated my milestones in my room, quietly, with a book or a candy bar I bought with my own money. I told myself it made me strong. I told myself I was independent, but deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't independent. I was disregarded. The older I got, the more the silence around me grew. It wasn't just about forgotten lunches or missed vacations anymore. The stakes got higher. The milestones got bigger, and the empty chairs at my events multiplied. High school was where the pattern became undeniable. It was a pattern of almost. They almost made it. They planned to come. Something came up. In my junior year, I entered the state science fair. This wasn't a small school project. I had spent 6 months growing bacteria cultures in the garage. The smell was terrible, and my mother complained every day about it, but I kept going. I made it to the finals. The event was held at the convention center downtown. It was a big deal. There were judges from universities. There were scholarships on the line. "We'll be there," my father promised the night before. "What time?" "Judging is at 5 p.m., I said. Awards are at 7 p.m. We'll leave work early, he said. I stood by my poster board at 4:45 p.m. I was wearing a blazer I had bought at a thrift store because my mother said she didn't have time to take me shopping. I looked around the room. Other students were surrounded by parents. Fathers were adjusting ties. Mothers were holding cameras. The judges came around at 5 p.m. I presented my research. I answered their questions. I kept glancing at the double doors at the back of the hall. Every time they opened, my heart jumped, but it was never them. 6 p.m. came, the judging was over. The students were eating pizza. I checked my phone. No texts, no calls. 7 p.m. came. The awards ceremony began. I sat in the third row of metal folding chairs. To my left was a boy whose parents were holding a bouquet of flowers. To my right was a girl whose dad had his arm around her shoulders. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. I stared straight ahead. Third place in microbiology, Grace Brennan. They called my name. I stood up. I walked to the stage. The applause was polite. I shook the judge's hand. I took the certificate and the small medal. I looked out into the audience, blinded by the stage lights, searching for a familiar face. I saw hundreds of people, but I didn't see my family. I walked off the stage and went back to my seat. I sat there until the ceremony ended. The hall began to clear out. The janitors started folding up the chairs. At 8:30 p.m. my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Where are you?" "We're outside." I packed up my project. I walked out to the curb. The family minivan was idling there. I opened the sliding door and climbed in. "Sorry we missed it," my father said. He didn't turn around. He was looking at the GPS. Vivian needed new cleats for soccer, and the store was a nightmare. Then we decided to grab dinner while we were out. "We got you a burger," my mother said, passing a greasy paper bag back to me. "It's probably cold now." They didn't ask if I won. They didn't ask to see the project. They had chosen soccer cleats and burgers over the biggest night of my academic life. "I got third place," I said quietly. "That's nice, honey," my mother said. "Did you save me a napkin? I have ketchup on my hands." I ate the cold burger in the dark back seat. The medal was in my pocket, pressing against my leg. It felt heavy. It felt like a piece of lead. 2 years later, it was high school graduation. This was the one event I thought they couldn't ruin. It was a mandatory life event. Everyone went to their kids' graduation. They came. They actually came. They sat in the bleachers. I saw them. My mother was fanning herself with the program. Brendan was playing a game on his phone. Vivian was texting. I walked across the stage. I heard a few claps from their section. I got my diploma. After the ceremony, families were swarming the football field. Hugging, taking pictures, crying. I found my family near the exit gate. "Finally," Brendan groaned. "That took forever. It's so hot out here." "Let's get a picture," my mother said. She took one photo of me holding the diploma. She didn't check it. "Okay, let's go. We have reservations at the Italian place." We went to dinner. But the dinner wasn't about me. "So," my father said, buttering a roll. "Brendan, coach says if you bulk up this summer, you're a shoo-in for varsity quarterback." The entire dinner conversation revolved around Brendan's workout routine. They talked about protein powder. They talked about gym memberships. They talked about the schedule for fall training. I sat there in my graduation dress, my diploma resting on the empty chair next to me. "I got into the honors college," I said during a lull in the conversation. "We know, Grace, you told us," Vivian said, rolling her eyes. "God, do you have to brag?" "I'm not bragging," I said. "I'm just saying. It's a big day." "Of course it is," my mother said, patting my hand before instantly pulling hers away to wave at a waiter. "We're very proud. Can we get more breadsticks?" They paid the bill. We went home. That was it. No party, no cake. No good job. Just breadsticks and talk about Brendan's muscles. When I left for college that August, the abandonment became physical. I was going to Stanford. It was across the country. It was a huge achievement. "We can't drive you," my father said a week before I was supposed to leave. "It's too far and Brendan has tryouts." "So how do I get there?" I asked. I had 2 suitcases and a box of books. "You can fly," he said. "We'll pay for the ticket." They dropped me off at the airport at the departures curb. They didn't park. They didn't come in to help me check my bags. "Call us when you land," my mother said. "Good luck, kid," my father said. I dragged my luggage out of the trunk. The car pulled away before I even made it to the automatic doors. I flew to California alone. I took a shuttle to the campus. I hauled my boxes up 3 flights of stairs to my dorm room. I met my roommate, Sarah. Her entire family was there. Her dad was assembling a bookshelf. Her mom was hanging curtains. Her brother was setting up her computer. They looked up when I walked in, sweating and alone. "Hi," Sarah's mom said brightly. "Where are your folks?" "They couldn't make it," I said. "Work." "Oh, you poor thing," she said. "Here, let Dave help you with that suitcase." Sarah's dad helped me. A stranger helped me move into my life, while my own father was probably watching Brendan throw a football in the backyard. Over the next 4 years, the pattern held. I sent them invitations to everything. Dean's List ceremony, research symposium, sorority family weekend. They never came, not once. "It's too expensive to fly," they said. "We're just so busy with Vivian's wedding planning," they said. "Brendan is having a hard time. We need to be here for him," they said. I sat in empty family seats while my peers introduced their parents to professors. I learned to stop looking at the door. I learned to smile when people asked where my family was. "They're really supportive from afar," I would lie. "They just have crazy schedules." It was a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. Each absence carved a quiet hollow inside me. It wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was a dull, constant ache. It was the feeling of standing in a crowded room and knowing that, if you fell, no one would be there to catch you. I started to build a life around that hollow. I focused on my work. I focused on my studies. I stopped calling as often. I stopped expecting them to ask how I was. But I hadn't given up hope completely. Not yet. There was one tiny, foolish part of me that thought, maybe for the big one. Maybe for the doctorate. That was the hope that would finally break me. The doctorate was the finish line. It was the culmination of 5 years of sleepless nights, bad coffee, and grueling research. It was the biggest thing I had ever done. It was the biggest thing anyone in my family had ever done. I wanted them there. I needed them there, so I treated their attendance like a project manager. I didn't leave anything to chance. 8 months before my defense date, I flew home for Christmas. I sat them all down in the living room. "Okay," I said, pulling out a calendar I had printed. "May 14th, that is the day. I am defending my dissertation at Stanford. I need you all to book your flights now." "May," my mother said, looking at the Christmas tree. "That's so far away, Grace." "It's not that far," I insisted. "Flight prices are cheap right now. Please put it in your phones." I watched them take out their phones. I watched my father type into his calendar. I watched Vivian scribble it in her planner. "We'll be there, Gracie," my father said. "We wouldn't miss it. Dr. Brennan has a nice ring to it." I believed him. 3 months later, I sent a group email. Subject: Logistics for May 14th graduation. I included hotel recommendations. I included a map of the campus. I included the time of the ceremony and the dinner reservation I had made for afterward. My mother replied, "Got it. Looks great." 1 month before I called, "Did you guys book the flights?" I asked. "Dad is handling it," my mother said. "Don't worry so much. You're always so high-strung. We'll be there." 2 weeks before, I sent a text. "Just confirming you have the address for the auditorium. See you in 14 days. Vivian liked the message. Brendan sent a thumbs-up emoji. I let myself relax. I let myself imagine the picture we would take. Me in my doctoral robes, holding the thick-bound copy of my thesis, my family smiling around me. I thought, this will fix it. This is the accomplishment that finally makes them see me. The morning of May 14th dawned bright and cool in California. I woke up at 5 a.m. I couldn't sleep. My stomach was in knots, but it was a good kind of nervous. Today I was becoming a doctor. I showered and put on my suit. I did my hair. I drank a cup of tea. I checked my phone. It was 7 a.m. Pacific time, which meant it was 9 a.m. in Austin. They should be at the airport, or maybe even in the air already if they took the early flight. There were no texts. I sent a message to the group chat, heading to campus. "Let me know when you land. Can't wait to see you." I went to the university. I set up my presentation in the small auditorium. My advisor, Dr. Holloway, came in. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little," I smiled, "but ready." "Is your family here yet?" he asked, looking at the empty seats. "They're coming," I said confidently. "Their flight might be a little tight, but they'll be here." 10 a.m. The defense was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. I checked my phone again. Nothing. 10:15 a.m. People started filing in. Other graduate students. Professors from the department. A few friends I had made in the program. I kept my eyes on the double doors at the back. Every time they swung open, I held my breath. 10:25 a.m. The room was full, except for the front row. I had placed 4 reserved signs on the seats in the center. Mom, Dad, Vivian, Brendan. The signs sat there, white and stark against the dark fabric of the chairs. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. It was a call from my mother. I answered it immediately, whispering, "Mom, are you guys here? I'm about to start." Grace, her voice sounded loud. There was wind in the background, and music. Loud country music, and laughter. "Mom, where are you?" I asked. "Are you in the parking lot?" "Parking lot?" she laughed. "No, honey, we're in the backyard." I froze. "What?" "We're at Brendan's place," she said. "He's hosting a barbecue. It's the first really nice weekend of the year. The weather is gorgeous." The room spun. I gripped the podium to keep from falling. "Mom," I whispered, "it's May 14th. "I know the date, Grace," she said, sounding annoyed. "Why are you whispering?" "My dissertation," I said, my voice cracked. "My defense, it's happening right now, in 5 minutes." There was a pause on the line, then I heard her say, away from the phone, "Turn the music down, Brendan. I can't hear your sister." She came back on the line. "Oh, is that today?" "I told you," I said. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. "I told you for 8 months. You put it in your calendar. You said you booked flights." "Well, we didn't book flights," she said casually. "We looked at them last week, and they were just astronomical, Grace. $2,000 for the 4 of us. We couldn't justify that for a 30-minute speech." "It's not a speech," I said. "It's my doctorate." We know," she said. "We're proud of you." But Brendan decided to have this barbecue last minute because his new girlfriend is in town, and we all really wanted to meet her. "We figured you wouldn't mind. You're always so independent." I looked at the reserved signs. "You figured I wouldn't mind," I repeated. "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "We'll send a card." "Oh, hold on, Brendan just burned the burgers. I have to go, call us when you're done." "Love you." The line went dead. I stood there. The phone was still pressed to my ear. I could still hear the ghost of the laughter, the country music, the joy of a family barbecue happening 1,500 miles away. They weren't stuck in traffic. There was no emergency. No one was sick. They were eating burgers. They were meeting a girlfriend Brendan had probably been dating for 2 weeks. They had chosen a barbecue over the defining moment of my life. And the worst part wasn't the anger. The worst part was the clarity. For years, I told myself they were just disorganized. I told myself they were busy. I told myself they loved me, but they were just bad at showing it. But standing there, in my suit, with my research behind me and empty chairs in front of me, the truth hit me like a physical blow to the chest. They didn't forget. You don't forget something you are reminded of for 8 months. You don't forget a date you wrote down. They simply didn't care. They made a choice. They looked at the calendar, saw Grace's defense, and then saw Brendan's barbecue, and it wasn't even a contest. I was the option they could discard. I was the one who would understand. I was the one who didn't matter. Dr. Holloway touched my shoulder. I jumped. "Grace," he asked gently. "It's 10:30. Are we waiting for anyone?" I looked at him. I looked at the reserved signs one last time. I walked down the steps of the stage. I walked to the front row. I picked up the signs. Mom, Dad, Vivian, Brendan. I crumbled them into a ball in my hand. I walked to the trash can in the corner and dropped them in. "No," I said. My voice was steady. It was colder than I had ever heard it before. "We aren't waiting for anyone. Everyone who matters is already here." I walked back to the podium. I took a deep breath. And I began to speak. I defended my dissertation alone. I spoke for 45 minutes. I explained my research on environmental sustainability and urban planning. I answered every question the committee threw at me. I was sharp. I was articulate. I was brilliant. When I finished, the committee asked me to step outside while they deliberated. I stood in the hallway. Usually this is the moment where the student paces nervously, and their family huddles around them, patting their back, telling them it went well. I stood against the wall. I checked my phone. No texts. No good luck. No thinking of you. 10 minutes later, Dr. Holloway opened the door. He was smiling. He extended his hand. "Congratulations," he said. "Dr. Brennan." The committee shook my hand. My friends hugged me. We drank cheap champagne in plastic cups. I smiled. I thanked them. But inside, something had shifted. The engine that had been running my life, the engine that ran on the fuel of pleasing them, of earning their love, had simply run out of gas. It sputtered and died right there in that hallway. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt efficient. I declined the offer to go out for drinks with my cohort. "I'm exhausted," I told them. "I just want to sleep." I walked back to my apartment. It was 4 p.m. I didn't sleep. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder on my desktop. I didn't name it family. I didn't name it sadness. I named it transition. I opened a blank document. I typed a list. It wasn't a list of grievances, it was a list of actions. Name, change, phone number, bank, accounts, address, emergency contacts, social media. I looked at the list. It looked like a project plan. It looked like a demolition order. I started with the bank. I had a joint savings account with my mother. It was a relic from when I was 16. I had put almost all the money in it, savings from summer jobs, stipends from my research. She rarely touched it, but she had access. I logged in. I transferred every single cent to my personal checking account. The balance on the joint account went to $0. I closed the tab. Next, I went to the state court website. I looked up the petition for a legal name change. Reason for change, I stared at the blinking cursor. I could have written a novel there. I could have written about the empty chairs and the cold burgers and the missed graduations. I typed, personal preference. I downloaded the forms. I filled them out. Then I went to my contacts. I scrolled to Mom. I hovered over the edit button. I didn't delete her number. That would be too emotional. Instead, I changed the ringtone to silent. I turned off notifications for her messages. I did the same for Dad, for Vivian, for Brendan. Then, I went to my email settings. I created a filter. Any email coming from their addresses would skip the inbox and go directly to a folder named Archive. I wouldn't see it. I wouldn't get a notification. It would just disappear into the digital void. I worked for 6 hours. The sun went down. The room got dark. I didn't turn on the light. The glow of the screen illuminated my face. I wasn't crying. I wasn't drinking wine and sobbing over old photo albums. I was working. I was surgical. I was removing a tumor. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Brendan. Bro, the barbecue was lit. Sorry we missed the speech thing. Mom said you were mad. Don't be a buzzkill. I looked at the message. A buzzkill. I had just become a doctor of philosophy, and I was a buzzkill because I wanted my family to witness it. I didn't reply. I went to my service provider's website. I clicked on Change Number. The screen warned me, this action cannot be undone. You will lose access to your old messages. I clicked Confirm. A new number popped up on the screen. It was clean. It was random. It had no history attached to it. I wrote it down on a post-it note. Finally, I went to the university portal. I had to update my diploma request. Name on diploma, it currently said Grace Brennan. Brennan. That was their name. It was the name of the people who forgot. It was the name of the girl who waited by the window. It was the name of the invisible daughter. I backspaced. I typed, Grace Morrison. Morrison was my grandmother's maiden name. She was the only person who had ever truly looked at me when I was a child. She had died when I was 10, but I remembered she used to hold my face in her hands and say, You are a quiet storm, Grace. Grace Morrison. It looked right, it looked strong. I hit submit. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the streetlights. I felt lighter, physically lighter. The heavy blanket of expectation that I had been carrying for 26 years was gone. I didn't have to hope anymore. I didn't have to wait. I didn't have to be disappointed. I was an orphan now, but I was an orphan by choice. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. It was a simple dinner. But as I ate it, standing in the quiet of my apartment, it tasted better than any meal I had ever eaten. The girl who begged for lunch money was gone. The girl who waited in the parking lot was gone. The girl who cried over empty seats was gone. Dr. Grace Morrison finished her sandwich, washed the plate, and went to bed. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. The morning I went to the courthouse, I didn't feel like I was going to a legal appointment. I felt like I was going to a funeral, but it wasn't a sad funeral. It was the kind where you bury something that has been dead for a long time, something that needed to be put in the ground so the living could move on. I wore the same charcoal suit I had worn for my dissertation defense. It felt like my armor. It was the only piece of clothing I owned that felt like it belonged to the new version of me. The courthouse in Santa Clara County was a large, gray building. It smelled like floor wax and old paper. I went through the security checkpoint. I put my bag on the belt. I walked through the metal detector. I didn't beep. I walked to the clerk's office. I took a numbered ticket from the red dispenser. Number 42. I sat on a hard wooden bench and waited. I looked around at the other people. There was a young couple holding hands, probably getting a marriage license. There was a man looking angry and tired, probably filing for divorce. And then there was me. Number 42, a voice called out. I walked to the window. The clerk was a woman with glasses on a chain and a tired expression. She didn't look up immediately. How can I help you? She asked, typing on her keyboard. I have a hearing for a name change, I said. Grace Brennan. She stopped typing. She looked at me. Case number. I slid the paperwork under the glass partition. My folder was organized. Everything was clipped and highlighted. I didn't want any delays. I didn't want any questions I couldn't answer. She checked the file. Okay, Judge Miller, courtroom 3 billion. You're up in 20 minutes. I walked to courtroom 3 billion. I sat in the back. When my name was called, I walked to the front. The judge was an older man with white hair. He looked over his glasses at me. Grace Brennan, he asked. Yes, Your Honor. And you are petitioning to change your name to Grace Morrison. Yes, Your Honor. Is this change to avoid debts, criminal charges, or lawsuits? He asked. It was a standard question. No, Your Honor. Why do you want to change your name? This was the question I had practiced in the mirror. I could have told him the truth. I could have told him that Brennan felt like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. I could have told him that every time I heard it, I heard my mother's dismissive tone or my father's indifference. But I kept it simple, direct. It is my grandmother's name, I said. I wish to honor her memory and start my professional career with her name. The judge nodded. It was a good answer. It was a respectable answer. Very well, he said. He stamped a document. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was loud. Thwack. Petition granted, he said. Good luck, Miss Morrison. I walked out of the courtroom. My hands were shaking, just a little, not from fear, from adrenaline. I went back to the clerk's office to get the certified copies of the order. I bought 10 copies. I wanted to be sure I never ran out. When I held the paper in my hand, seeing the court seal and the words Grace Morrison, I expected to feel sad. I expected to mourn the girl I used to be. But I didn't. I felt clean. I felt like I had just taken a long, hot shower after working in the mud for 20 years. The next week was a blur of administration. I treated it like a job. Monday, Social Security Administration. I sat in a plastic chair for 3 hours. When I finally got to the window, I handed over my old card. The woman behind the glass took scissors and cut it in half. I watched the name Grace Brennan get sliced apart. She dropped the pieces in a bin. Your new card will arrive in 7 to 10 days, she said. Tuesday, the DMV. I took a new photo. I didn't smile, but I didn't frown either. I looked calm. I looked steady. When they handed me the temporary paper license, I stared at it. Grace Morrison. Height, 5'6", eyes, brown. It was me. But it was a version of me that didn't belong to them anymore. Wednesday, the bank. This was the most satisfying part. I walked into the branch. I sat down with a banker. I need to update my accounts, I said, and I need new debit cards and checks. The banker was chatty. Did you just get married? She asked, looking at the name change order. No, I said. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't smile to soften the answer. Oh, she said, flushing slightly. Okay, let's get this updated. She printed out a new signature card. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper for a split second. My muscle memory wanted to write a B. I forced my hand to move differently. Grace Morrison. The signature was sharper, pointier. It looked like barbed wire. It looked like a boundary. Thursday, Human Resources at the university. I went to the admin building. I needed my final transcripts and my diploma to reflect the truth. This is cutting it close, the registrar said. We're printing diplomas next week. I have the court order, I said, sliding it across the desk. It's legal, it has to be changed. She sighed, but she typed it in. Okay, Dr. Grace Morrison. It's in the system. By Friday afternoon, I had erased Grace Brennan from every legal system in the United States. I went back to my apartment. I had a box of old papers under my bed. Old birthday cards from my parents. Old school projects with Grace Brennan written in crayon. I took the box to the recycling bin behind my apartment complex. I didn't look through it. I didn't read the generic happy birthday, love mom and dad messages one last time. I dumped the box into the bin. The papers fluttered down, mixing with pizza boxes and soda cans. I walked back upstairs. My phone was on the kitchen counter. It had been silent all week. No one had called. No one had texted to ask how my defense went. No one had checked in. They didn't know I didn't exist anymore. To them, I was just Grace, the daughter who was probably sulking. They were probably waiting for me to call and apologize for ruining the vibe of the barbecue. They would be waiting a long time. I sat down at my laptop. I opened my email. I saw the folder labeled Archive. It had a number next to it. 4. They had sent 4 emails. I didn't open the folder. I didn't want to know what they said. I composed a new email. It wasn't to them. It was to a real estate agent in Portland, Oregon. Subject: Apartment Inquiry Body. My name is Dr. Grace Morrison. I am relocating for work next month. I am interested in the 1-bedroom unit on Elm Street. I hit send. I was Grace Morrison. And Grace Morrison didn't live in the past. She lived in the future. I chose Portland because it was wet. That sounds strange, I know, but Austin was dry and hot. California was sunny and bright. I wanted rain. I wanted green trees that dripped water. I wanted a place that felt quiet and washed clean. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I simply packed. I sold my furniture. The bed, the desk, the cheap dining table I had bought in grad school, I sold it all on Craigslist. I didn't want to bring anything with me that held the energy of the last 4 years. I kept only my clothes, my books, and my laptop. Everything fit into the back of my small sedan. I drove north. The drive took 2 days. I drove up the coast. I watched the landscape change. The golden hills of California turned into the towering pines of Oregon. The air got cooler. The sky turned a soft, comforting gray. I crossed the state line into Oregon, and I felt a physical release in my chest. It was as if I had been holding my breath since I was 7 years old, and I was finally exhaling. I arrived in Portland on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining, just like I hoped. My new apartment was in a quiet neighborhood called Selwood. It was on the 2nd floor of an old house that had been converted into units. It had hardwood floors that creaked in a friendly way. It had a big window that looked out onto a massive oak tree. I unpacked my books. I hung up my clothes. For the first time in my life, I decorated for me. In my childhood home, my room had been a guest room first, and my room second. It was painted a neutral beige so it could be repurposed if needed. I wasn't allowed to put posters on the walls because of the tape. Here, I bought a dark green rug. I bought a velvet armchair. I bought art, strange, abstract prints that I liked. I filled the windowsill with plants. It was quiet, but it wasn't the lonely silence of my childhood bedroom. It was a peaceful silence. It was a silence I had chosen. 2 weeks later, I started my new job. I had been hired by a mid-sized environmental consulting firm called Verd Strategies. They worked with cities to plan sustainable parks and water systems. I walked in on my first day wearing my charcoal suit. I was nervous. I was used to being the person in the room who took notes. I was used to being the person who fetched the coffee. I was used to being interrupted. My boss was a man named David. He was in his 50s with a beard and kind eyes. "Welcome, Grace," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "We're really excited to have you. Your dissertation on urban water runoff was fascinating." I circulated it to the team. I blinked. "You read it." "We all did," he said. "It's why we hired you." He led me to my office, not a cubicle, an office. It had a door. It had a nameplate on the wall. Dr. Grace Morrison, Senior Consultant. I stared at the nameplate. I touched the raised letters. "Is everything okay?" David asked. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It's perfect." The first staff meeting was the true test. There were 8 of us around a conference table. They were discussing a new project for the city of Beaverton. They were stuck on a problem regarding soil erosion. "We could use a retaining wall," one colleague suggested. "Too expensive," David said. I sat there looking at the blueprints. I saw the solution. It was obvious to me, but the old habit kicked in. "Stay quiet, don't speak. They don't want to hear you, you'll just annoy them." I bit my lip. I looked down at my notepad. "Grace," I looked up. David was looking at me. The whole room was looking at me. But they weren't looking with annoyance. They were looking with expectation. "You have a background in soil composition," David said. "What do you think?" My throat felt tight. I think you shouldn't use a wall," I said. My voice was quiet. "Go on," David said. He leaned forward. He didn't check his watch. He didn't look at his phone. He waited. I cleared my throat. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. I picked up a marker. "If you use native root systems here and here," I drew a diagram, "you can stabilize the bank without concrete. It's cheaper and it manages the water flow better." I spoke for 5 minutes. I explained the science. I explained the cost benefits. When I finished, I turned around, expecting them to be bored. expecting them to be talking amongst themselves. The room was silent. They were taking notes. "That's brilliant," a woman named Sarah said. "Why didn't we think of that?" "Let's do it," David said. "Grace, can you lead the implementation on this?" "Me?" I asked. "You're the expert," he said simply. I sat back down. My hands were trembling under the table. They listened. They didn't just hear noise, they heard value. I went home that night and cried. I sat on my velvet armchair, watching the rain hit the window, and I wept. I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because I was grieving the 26 years I had spent thinking I was stupid. I cried for the little girl who thought she was invisible. She wasn't invisible. She was just in the wrong room. She was with the wrong people. My life in Portland settled into a rhythm. I worked hard. I was promoted within 6 months. I made friends, real friends. I met a woman named Alina at a pottery class I joined. We went for coffee every Sunday. One Sunday, we were sitting in a cafe watching the rain. "So," Alina said, stirring her latte, "you never talk about your family. Are they back east?" I paused. I held my warm mug in my hands. "I don't have a family," I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud. Alina didn't push. She didn't ask what happened. Or, "Oh no, did they die?" She looked at my face, saw the peace there, and understood. "Well," she said, lifting her mug, "you have us, the pottery crew." I smiled. "Yes, I do. I was building a new family. A family of choice. A family of colleagues who respected my mind and friends who enjoyed my company. But the old life wasn't done with me yet. It had been 6 months since the transition. 6 months since I changed my number. 6 months of silence. I knew they would eventually figure it out. I knew the silence wouldn't last forever. It started with a LinkedIn notification. I had created a new LinkedIn profile for Dr. Grace Morrison. I had blocked my parents and siblings immediately, but I hadn't blocked everyone. I got a notification. "Aunt Linda viewed your profile." Aunt Linda was my mother's sister. She was a gossip. She was the family news network. I stared at the screen. I knew what was happening. Linda had probably been looking for Grace Brennan to see where I was working, found nothing, and then dug deeper. Maybe she searched by my university. Maybe she saw a photo of me on my company's website. However she did it, she found me. 2 days later, my work phone rang. It was the receptionist. "Dr. Morrison, there's a woman on the line. She says she's your mother," she sounds. Frantic, my heart hammered against my ribs. The physical reaction was instantaneous. Sweat, nausea, fear. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I looked at the rain falling outside. I looked at the nameplate on my door. Grace Morrison. "Dr. Morrison," the receptionist asked again. "Should I put her through?" "No," I said. My voice was calm. "I don't have a mother. Please tell her she has the wrong number." "Oh," the receptionist said, confused. "Okay. Sorry about that." I hung up. I sat there for a long time. I knew it wasn't over. I knew this was just the first crack in the dam. They knew where I was now. They knew my name. But I wasn't the same person they used to know. I had armor now. I had a title. I had a life. If they wanted to find me, they could try. But they wouldn't find Grace Brennan. They would find a stranger. And this stranger wasn't going to let them in. The silence I had built was strong, but my family was loud. They were used to being heard. They were used to demanding attention and getting it. When they realized I wasn't just sulking, that I was actually gone, their reaction wasn't sadness. It was panic. And then it was rage. It started a week after the receptionist called me. I was sitting at my desk at Verd Strategies reviewing a soil sample report. My office phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was a local Portland number. "Dr. Morrison," I answered. "Hello, is this Grace Brennan?" A male voice, authoritative. "My name is Grace Morrison," I said. "Who is this?" "This is Officer Miller with the Portland Police Bureau. We received a call requesting a welfare check on a Grace Brennan." The callers, a Mr. and Mrs. Brennan from Austin, claim their daughter has been missing for 6 months and may be in danger. They traced an IP address to this workplace. I sat up straight. A welfare check. It was a classic tactic. It was a way to force contact when someone had cut you off. They were using the police as their personal messengers. "I am not missing, officer," I said calmly. "I am an estranged adult. My family does not have my contact information because I do not want them to have it. I am safe. I am employed. I am sitting in my office right now." "I see," the officer said. His tone softened. He probably dealt with this often. "I do need to verify your identity to close the case. Can I stop by?" "Of course," I said. He arrived 20 minutes later. I met him in the lobby. I handed him my Oregon driver's license. Grace Morrison. He looked at it, he looked at me. Okay, Dr. Morrison, he said, handing it back. I'll let them know we made contact and that you are safe. Do you want me to pass along a message? No, I said. Please just tell them the subject of their inquiry was not found. Tell them Grace Brennan doesn't live here. He nodded slowly. I can tell them you're safe and do not wish to be contacted. Thank you, I said. That was the breach. The police report confirmed I was alive. It confirmed I was in Portland. And it confirmed I was refusing to speak to them. That's when the bombardment began. They couldn't call my phone because I had changed the number. They couldn't email my personal account because of the filters. So they got creative. They started calling the main line of my company. My receptionist, a sweet girl named Jenny, came to my office 3 days later. She looked stressed. Grace, she said, I keep getting calls. It's a woman. She says she's your mother. She's really intense. She says it's a medical emergency. My stomach dropped. What kind of emergency? She wouldn't say. She just said, tell her it's life or death and she needs to call home immediately. I knew this trick. Life or death, in my family usually meant Vivian had broken a nail or my father couldn't find the remote. But there was always that tiny sliver of doubt. What if someone is actually dying? I went to my office. I closed the door. I used my desk phone to call my old home number. I blocked my caller ID. My mother picked up on the first ring. Hello, Grace, she sounded breathless. You called my work, I said. My voice was flat. You told my receptionist it was life or death. Well, finally, she yelled. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? We were sick with worry. We called the police. I know, I said. The police came, I'm fine. What is the emergency? The emergency is that you have abandoned your family, she screamed. You missed Thanksgiving. You missed Brendan's birthday. We have been sending emails for months. Why aren't you answering? That's not a medical emergency, I said. Goodbye. Wait, she shrieked. Don't you dare hang up on me. We know you changed your name. Aunt Linda saw it online. Grace Morrison, are you kidding me? You took that old woman's name, after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me, I asked. You missed my doctorate defense for a barbecue. Oh my God, are you still on that? She laughed, a harsh disbelief sound. That was 6 months ago. You're destroying this family over a missed flight. You are being incredibly selfish. Vivian is getting married in the spring, and you are the maid of honor. You need to come home and get fitted for your dress. I closed my eyes. They hadn't learned a thing. In 6 months of silence, they hadn't reflected. They hadn't thought maybe we hurt her. They just thought I was being difficult. They thought I was a staff member who had walked off the job, and they needed me back to fill the position. I'm not maid of honor, I said. I'm not coming to the wedding. You have to, she said. What will people think? Everyone asks where you are. We've been telling them you're doing fieldwork in the jungle. You are embarrassing us, Grace. Embarrassing us. That was the core of it. Not we miss you, but you are making us look bad. I'm hanging up now, I said. Do not call my office again. If you do, I will file a harassment suit. I have lawyers here. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. We are your blood. I'm Grace Morrison, I said. I don't have any blood relations in Austin. I hung up. I sat there shaking. My heart was racing at 100 miles per hour. It wasn't easy. It felt like cutting off a limb. But hearing her voice, the entitlement, the dismissal, the complete lack of accountability, reminded me exactly why I had left. They didn't stop there. A week later, a package arrived at my office. It was a large box. I opened it. Inside was a collection of things from my childhood room. But it wasn't sentimental things. It was garbage. It was old, stained t-shirts. It was a broken lamp. It was a stack of bills that had come to their house in my name, junk mail mostly. And on top was a note from Vivian. Since you're so fancy now with your new name, you can have your trash. Mom was going to burn it, but I saved it. You owe me $45 for shipping. Also, I registered for the Dyson vacuum. Since you have a big CEO job now, you can afford it. Don't be cheap. I looked at the box of junk. I didn't feel angry. I felt pity. They were flailing. They were trying to hurt me, trying to get a reaction, trying to pull on strings that had been cut. I took the box to the break room. Does anyone want a broken lamp? I asked my colleagues. I can fix it, the IT guy said. I need parts. It's yours, I said. I threw the note in the recycling bin. I didn't buy the vacuum. For the next few months, the attempts continued, but they grew weaker. My father sent a LinkedIn message before I blocked him too. Your mother is crying every day. You are killing her. Call home. Brendan sent a text to my old number which I assumed failed, but he probably sent it anyway. They were screaming into a void, and the amazing thing was, the void didn't scream back. My life in Portland continued. I went to work. I watered my plants, I laughed with Alina. I dated a nice man named Mark who was an architect. I told Mark about them on our third date. They sound exhausting, he said, frowning. They are, I said. That's why I'm not tired anymore. I thought I was free. I thought I had weathered the storm. But the universe has a funny way of testing your resolve. It usually waits until you feel safe, and then it drops a bomb. The bomb came in the form of an obituary. I had a Google alert set up, not for my parents, but for Ruth Brennan, Austin, Texas. Great Aunt Ruth. She was my father's aunt. She was the only person in that entire extended clan who had ever been kind to me. She was the one who sent me $50 in a card for every birthday, even the ones my parents forgot. She was the one who told me I was smart. She was the one who, when I was 12 and crying in the bathroom at a family reunion because Vivian had made fun of my shoes, came in and handed me a handkerchief. Don't let them make you hard, Grace, she had told me. You're better than them because you feel things. The alert popped up on my phone on a Tuesday morning in November. Ruth Marie Brennan, 88, passed away peacefully. I stared at the screen. I felt a sharp, clean sadness. I didn't cry for my parents, but I cried for Ruth. I read the details. The funeral was Friday. At St. Mary's Chapel in Austin. I knew I had to go. I didn't have to go for them. I had to go for her. I had to go to say goodbye to the only person who had seen me, but going back meant walking into the lion's den. It meant breaking the physical distance. It meant they would see me. I called David, my boss. I need to take Friday off, I said. A death in the family. Take all the time you need, he said. I booked a flight. I didn't book a flight to Austin. I booked a flight to San Antonio, which was an hour away. I didn't want to risk running into anyone at the Austin airport. I rented a car. I packed my charcoal suit. I packed black heels. I looked in the mirror. I looked different than the girl who left Austin. My hair was shorter, sharper. My posture was better. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like Dr. Grace Morrison. I was going back. But I wasn't going back to apologize. I was going back to pay my respects. And if they wanted a confrontation, I was finally ready to give them one. The chapel smelled of lilies and old beeswax. It was the same smell from my childhood, a smell that used to make my stomach turn with anxiety. Today, it just smelled like a room. I arrived late on purpose. I didn't want to mingle in the foyer. I didn't want the awkward small talk with cousins I hadn't seen in 5 years. The service had just begun. The organ was playing a low, mournful hymn. I walked in through the heavy oak doors. My heels clicked softly on the stone floor. I saw the back of their heads instantly. They were in the front row, of course. My mother was wearing a hat that was too big, something dramatic and black. My father was slumped in his suit. Vivian was checking her makeup in a compact mirror. Brendan was looking at his watch. They looked exactly the same. They looked like statues of themselves. I walked up the side aisle. I saw a spot in the second row, directly behind them. There was a gap between my Uncle Jerry and a cousin named Mike. I slid into the pew. I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at the casket covered in white roses. Goodbye, Aunt Ruth, I thought. Thank you for the handkerchief. The priest was speaking. Ruth was a woman of great faith. My mother shifted in her seat. She turned her head slightly to whisper something to Vivian. Her eyes swept over the second row. They passed me. Then they snapped back. She froze. Her eyes went wide. She turned her body fully around, ignoring the priest, ignoring the solemnity of the moment. She stared at me. She looked at my face. She looked at my suit. She looked at the calm way I was holding my head. Then she did something unforgivable. She spoke. You changed your name. It wasn't a whisper. It was a blurting out. It was a reflex. She had likely been stewing on it for months, screaming it in her kitchen, and seeing me right there, within touching distance, made the cork pop. The priest stopped talking. The organist hesitated, hanging on a note. Every single head in the chapel turned. Vivian whipped around. Grace, she gasped. Oh my God, you actually came? Brendan turned. He looked annoyed. Now. You're doing this now. I didn't move. I didn't shrink. I didn't look down at my shoes like the old Grace would have. I looked my mother dead in the eye. We are at a funeral, I said softly. My voice was low, but in the silence of the room it carried. Turn around. My mother's face turned red. She opened her mouth to argue, to cause a scene, to demand I explain myself right there in front of God and everyone. But she looked around. She saw the eyes of the community on her. She saw the judgment. For once, she realized she was the one making the noise. She clamped her mouth shut and turned back around. But I could see her shoulders shaking with rage. The service continued. I sat there, calm and steady. I felt like I was in the eye of a hurricane. The winds were screaming around me, but I was untouched. When the service ended, the priest said, "The family will receive guests in the courtyard." People stood up. My family stood up. They turned on me like a pack of wolves. "Outside," my father growled. "Now," I stood up. "I'm going to pay my respects to Ruth first." I walked past them. I walked to the casket. I placed my hand on the wood. I took a moment. I ignored the burning sensation of their eyes on my back. Then, I turned and walked out the side door into the courtyard. It was a gray, overcast day in Austin. The air was thick. They were waiting for me by an old oak tree, away from the other guests. They had formed a semicircle, a firing squad. "How dare you?" my mother hissed as soon as I got close. "You show up here after 6 months of silence, after blocking us, after changing your name like a criminal. Who do you think you are?" "I am Grace Morrison," I said. "You are Grace Brennan," she shouted. "You are my daughter. You don't get to just resign from this family." "I didn't resign," I said. "I was fired." "What are you talking about?" Vivian chimed in. She looked furious. "You're so dramatic. You're mad because we missed your speech. Get over it, Grace. It was one day. We have done everything for you. We fed you, we clothed you." "You forgot me," I said. "We didn't forget," my father yelled. "We were busy. Brendan had a barbecue." He said it as if it were a valid excuse. As if a barbecue was a natural disaster that couldn't be avoided. I looked at them. I looked at Brendan, who was looking at his phone, bored even now. I looked at Vivian, who was worried about how this scene looked to her friends. I looked at my parents, who were drowning in their own narcissism. "You didn't forget," I said. My voice was clear. I spoke to them like I spoke to my clients at the firm, direct, factual, unemotional. "You prioritized." They went silent. "You had a calendar," I continued. "You had 8 months of reminders. You knew exactly where I was and what I was doing. And you looked at that day, and you looked at a barbecue, and you decided the barbecue was more important." "It was just a mistake," my mother wept. She switched tactics instantly, going from rage to victimhood. "We're human. Mothers make mistakes. How can you be so cruel? Changing your name, it's a slap in the face." "The paperwork simply reflected the truth," I said. "I have been alone in this family for 20 years. I raised myself. I celebrated myself. And on the most important day of my life, I stood alone. The name change just made it legal." "We love you," my mother wailed, reaching for me. I took a step back. "No," I said. "You don't. You love having someone to blame. You love having a scapegoat. You love having someone to do the chores and stay quiet. You don't love me. You don't even know me." "So that's it?" my father asked. His face was hard. "You're just done. You're going to walk away from your inheritance, from your family." "I don't want your money," I said. "And I don't want your drama." I looked at them one last time. I memorized their faces, not with love but with the detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. "I have a flight to catch," I said. "I have a job, I have a home. And none of it has anything to do with you. If you walk away now," my mother threatened, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "don't you ever come back, we will cut you off completely." I almost laughed. They still thought they held the scissors. They didn't realize the cord had been cut 6 months ago. "That's exactly what I want," I said. I turned around. "Grace," Vivian yelled, "you're ruining Aunt Ruth's funeral." I didn't stop. I walked across the courtyard. I walked past the cousins who were staring. I walked past the priest. My heels clicked on the pavement. Click, click, click. I walked to my rental car. I got in. I shut the door. The sound of the door closing sealed out the noise of the courtyard. It sealed out the yelling. It sealed out the guilt. I started the engine. I drove out of the church parking lot. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see them standing there looking confused and angry. I drove toward the highway, toward the airport, toward Portland. I turned on the radio. A classic rock song was playing. I hummed along. My hands were steady on the wheel. I had faced the monster. I had looked it in the eye, and I realized the monster wasn't scary anymore. It was just small. The rain in Portland welcomed me back like an old friend. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the air inside was still. It wasn't the empty stillness of my childhood home, where silence meant someone was angry. It was a warm, living stillness. It was the sound of a space that belonged entirely to me. On Monday morning, I walked into Verd Strategies. I poured a cup of coffee. I walked to my office. I stopped at the door. I looked at the nameplate again. Dr. Grace Morrison. For a second, I thought about the scene in the church courtyard. I thought about my mother's screaming face and my father's clenched fists. I realized I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel hurt. I just felt distant. They were like characters in a book I had finished reading. I had closed the cover and their story was over. "Morning, Grace," David called out as he walked past. "Good to have you back." "Good to be back," I said, and I meant it. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I had a meeting with the city planners at 10. I had lunch with Alina at 12. I had a date with Mark on Friday. My phone sat on the desk, silent. No frantic texts. No guilt trips. Just a quiet tool that I controlled. I realized then that my mother was wrong. She thought I had run away. She thought I had vanished. But as I looked out the window at the green trees and the gray sky, I knew the truth. I didn't vanish. I arrived. I was finally the main character of my own life. The silence around me wasn't a hole to be filled. It was a foundation. It was solid. And most importantly, it was mine.